Information shared on the following program is for general information purposes only. It does not constitute legal, tax, investment, or other advice, nor is it intended to recommend any particular investments, products, or financial instruments. Always seek advice from your financial advisor, attorney, or accountant with regard to investment, legal, or tax questions.
Welcome to the only show in the country dedicated to helping savers worry less about money, the Worry-Free Retirement, with your host, retirement specialist and six-time author and fiduciary, Tony Walker.
Well, welcome, folks, to the Worry-Free Retirement. And yes, I'm that little man in the sweater vest, retirement planning specialist and the world's friendliest financial fiduciary, Tony Walker. And in case you're just now joining us, by the way, all of these shows can be found at youtube.com. Just go to youtube.com and search Tony Walker Financial. But, yep, we're continuing our saga in Decision Fatigue, Part 4. And with us currently in the studio is Mr. Trey Juergens and Wes Walker. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
This has been good stuff. Thank you so much for all your time. We've got a few more things to cover today. In fact, today we're going to talk about how to coordinate things between spouses, and then also from an estate planning standpoint and setting up beneficiaries, why that's so important in retirement planning. But before we get into that, live from Zoom, via Zoom that is, from Bowling Green, Kentucky, is our own Heather Hughes.
Good morning, Tony.
And thank you for joining us from Bowling Green, Heather. And our topic today, as we continue this decision fatigue phenomenon that many savers go through in retirement, we want to talk about specifically what we call coordinating investments between spouses. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is this whole situation where, let's say we have two spouses coming in, and the number of times that one spouse tends to handle most of the finances and even the investments, whereas maybe the other spouse is not as familiar with those investments. What is the dilemma there for them and the concern we have moving forward in retirement?
Yes, Tony, we see that a lot. Typically, I think in most marriages, there is one spouse that handles the investments, the other may handle the household bills, or one handles all of it. That can be, working well throughout marriage, but as people get older, approaching retirement, the other spouse needs to be informed of what's going on, because something may happen, to the spouse that handles all of the financial decisions. And that could be through, illness, a death. You just don't know. And that leaves that surviving spouse kind of holding the bag and having no idea what to do with it. A lot of times we'll step in, or, it's important for us to have a plan in place. So it's a little more seamless if something like that were to happen to a married couple, that the other spouse would have an idea of what's going on and who to turn to when they need help.
Yeah, you mentioned that, Heather. I'll have to admit, my wife, who's a nurse and retired now, I've always handled the bills and the investments. So occasionally we'll be sitting around and she'll say, "So Tony, what is it I'm supposed to do if you die first?" And I always just say, "Just call Heather." But it is a dilemma. You see this a lot of times, Trey, because you get to see those folks who we've gone through the plan. Now you're at the delivery appointment. Speak to that game plan and how you've got to believe that spouse who doesn't handle the investments has to be reassured that now there's something in place should the other spouse pass away.
Yeah, in that delivery appointment, I've seen so many aha moments where someone that has not really ever kept up with finances finally feels organized. And when visually we lay out what accounts they had, what accounts now that they have under our watch, and then a plan of how to use those accounts throughout retirement, it's just gives them that moment that it clicks and it finally makes sense. So it's nice to see a little bit of a buy-in from the spouse that may not handle the finances when they finally actually understand what's going on.
There's a lot that can change when somebody dies too. I think to have someone in your corner who is working in your best interest at the death of a spouse can be very important. And to just help you from making, big, bad mistakes after the death of a loved one. They say you should always wait some time before making any big financial decisions. We'll get questions like that. Or if my spouse dies, can I roll over my IRA into her IRA? And just things you could really mess up if you're trying to go at it alone.
And Heather, speak to that. I guess the concerns we have that people don't understand what's going to happen when somebody dies, and even trying to move these assets around, and maybe even the next advisor that comes along, if they do see another advisor, I'm not saying they'd be unscrupulous, but maybe forcing decisions on spouses who aren't ready yet to make those decisions.
Definitely. I think you've always encouraged, widows or widowers to probably wait about 6 months before making any major decisions. Having said that, a lot of times we do need to move those assets into their names. So a lot of times we will just kind of, just do that, move the assets into their names, and then really kind of reevaluate the plan if we already have one in place, just to make sure it's still a good fit for that surviving spouse. Or if there's changes that need to be made, say that surviving spouse wants to move closer to family members, we'll have more of a coordinated effort on how to make those dreams happen as well.
Yeah, Trey, I've got a meeting today, a sad situation. They became clients only, I'm losing track of time, roughly about 2 months ago. He was already very ill. He really wanted us to handle everything. I think he knew that death was imminent. Certainly, he went on and passed away just a couple of weeks ago. His spouse is coming in, and we were rushing, trying to get things over. I know, Wes, you even tried to go over to their house just last minute. We were trying to do a lot of different things to get everything situated. But speak to that, how we have to set up new accounts for her, as Heather said, to get it transferred in her name. But again, we're going to move at her pace. And what would be the next step in that process for her?
It's really kind of a reevaluation of her vision for retirement. Unfortunately, it's not going to be with her spouse, but that's where we take a step back and really see what she plans to do with that money. And unfortunately, when he started going through that whole process, I think he kind of saw the writing on the wall and wanted it all to be consolidated with somebody that would take care of his wife.
A lot of changes too. Somebody dies, there's a Social Security benefit that's going to drop off from their passing. They might not have elected the income from one of their mailbox money annuities. In that case, they might be drawing a higher income because it's a single benefit rather than joint. So again, just to reiterate, I think to have somebody to show you the ropes, if there is a spouse passing, can be pretty invaluable.
Let's turn back to some more good news, I guess. And let's say these spouses live a long time, but as you get into retirement, and as people age, Heather, speak to the fact that it's interesting that sometimes spouses have totally different views on where their investment should be invested. Sometimes we even have investors on one hand, and then the other spouse is definitely a saver. How do we deal with that and try to approach both spouses and keep them both happy?
Yeah, I think we're about, 60-70% financial advisors, and the other remainder, 30-40% is marriage counselors. Uh, But a lot of times, clients will have different views on, one's going to be more investor bent, one's going to be more like a saver. I don't want to lose any of my money. So a lot of times we'll position assets accordingly, know that we've got safe funds available for clients, and we're segmenting that away for retirement anyway. And then addressing, some money for a little bit more of growth potential, for the investor type of spouse. But the nice thing about our plans is that we can tailor both of those inside that plan to hopefully accommodate both spouses and their wishes.
You're in that world a lot, Wes, because you've got to get in there and rebalance and taking money out. How do you deal with that sometimes when spouses really do have two different views on how much risk they want to take with their money?
Yeah, two different individual personalities can clash sometimes when it comes to money. I mean, just a random example, let's say somebody had an after-tax brokerage account with a large inbuilt capital gains position in there, and then that person passes away. Well, this account is now left to the spouse. They might get what's called a step up in the cost basis, so they wouldn't have to pay any taxes if they were to liquidate the account. That account might go from being 80-90% in stocks. Now all of a sudden it's transferred to someone who's a saver personality. It might go to some very risk-free or low-risk investments because of the transfer of those assets.
Yeah, I think the big thing with bringing all accounts, whether they're employer provided plans or IRAs from previous employers, and they bring them under our watch, it is unique when you sit down and really get to, okay, how would we like to invest these? And the wife is the saver, the husband's the investor, and it is ultimately all we money, as you would say. But when we lay out those plans, we'll show you how to use and enjoy it. And it is funny when you start looking at that, how they may, getting into a plan for retirement, they may adjust how they really feel. If they had a lot of risk in their 401k, now might be time to start dialing it back a little bit.
Good stuff. And I tell you, when we come back, this may get a little touchy, but I'm going to talk about also those that come to the table sometimes who've been in second marriages, those who have maybe some issues with adult children and they're worried about how they're going to leave these assets when they pass. So good stuff coming up, folks. This is the Worry-Free Retirement. More on this issue of decision fatigue. We'll be right back.
This Tony Walker Financial 5-star review comes to us from Michael Hall. We had been watching Tony Walker every Sunday for a while before I turned 60, and we knew we had to visit Mr. Walker. So glad we did. Tony and his team laid out a terrifically easy-to-follow game plan explaining everything. Tony Walker Financial really does alleviate lots of stress and worry from your life. Believe us, it is certainly one of the best decisions we have made to date. Because of it, we have led several of our friends to Tony Walker Financial, and they too are now worry-free. Thank you, Tony and team, for all you continue to do. If you'd like to read more of our 5-star reviews, simply log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
Having worked in the retirement planning field for 40 years, I know it's not just about how much money you've saved for retirement, but making sure you one day don't run out of money. That's where mailbox money comes in.
Mailbox money!
A reliable, lifelong income, much like the pension plans from the past. If you're interested in turning your 401k into mailbox money, let's talk. Just set up your free 10-minute phone call with myself at TonyWalkerFinancial.com. That's TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
The individuals in this interview are uncompensated clients at the time of filming. Their opinions expressed were provided to Worry Free Productions for use as an advertisement by Tony Walker Financial. Please refer to Form CRS and Form ADV Part 2B Disclosure Brochure for information regarding the advisory services offered by Tony Walker Financial.
Our client spotlight today shines brightly on Miss Darlene Benzik. And Miss Benzik, first of all, thank you so much for being on the program with us.
No, I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. So, Miss Benzik, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I have lived in the area for all of my life, quite frankly. Currently live in Oldham County.
And how did you find out about Tony Walker Financial?
We had been watching your show, like before church every Sunday. And of course, he viewed through the lens of your concepts and strategies, and he was like, spot on. And we both viewed the end of your show. You always tie it back to the Bible. And so that's very important to us. And so we prayed about it, and we came over here and just started gathering all these pieces. And then you all figured it out. It's like we just threw it all on your table, and then your folks figured it out beautifully. So.
And how has the experience been in working with our staff?
Oh, my. I've told everyone this, front to back. Usually you have bad apple in every batch, and there aren't any. I mean, everybody's been so helpful. When my husband initiated our changeover to Tony Walker, which I'm so grateful that he did, a few weeks later he passed away. So I was, as anybody out there who knows who's lost a spouse, your world kind of shatters, and you're picking up all these pieces that you're unsure of. And then you sat down with me personally, and I sat down with Trey, and everyone's taken their time and always so patient in a time where I wasn't always on top of things like I usually am. So, yeah, I appreciated everybody front to back.
Well, you're so welcome, and thank you for the opportunity to be of service.
Looking for an advisor you can trust? Schedule your free phone call with Tony at TonyWalkerFinancial.com or call 1-877-499-9255.
Welcome back to part 4 of Decision Fatigue. Of course, we have Heather Hughes in our Bowling Green office, Trey and Wes. Thank you all so much for this information. Now it's going to get a little more touchy. Heather, you made a comment earlier that we sometimes play marriage counselor. I always say I use my pop psychology degree from Western Kentucky University more frequently than I ever thought in this business. But let's get into something that it's a little tough sometimes to have these conversations, but we have to. By the way, in my book, Live Well, Die Broke, I talk about this. My dad used to call it wee money. But wee money is not always wee money, is it, Trey? When we have someone come in, they could be on their second marriage. And what are some of the issues that we have to dive into in terms of how we're going to arrange the money and what's going to happen to this money when one spouse dies when it is a second or even third marriage?
Yeah, that's a conversation to have before we really start moving money over at all is who do you want to receive this money when something happens to you? A lot of the time they do want to plan directly to give some money to their children at their death. We may find out that an ex-spouse is still a beneficiary on a 401k. So when it comes to updating beneficiaries and really understanding how to transition that money to your beneficiaries, planning comes in play.
Heather, your thoughts?
Oh, definitely. It can be kind of a sensitive issue. Oftentimes, if it's a married couple, you think, oh, it's just automatically going to the spouse, but that may not be the case. A lot of times, the children do kind of step in front of that new spouse in terms of beneficiaries go. And I think, Trey mentioned to the fact, a 401k may actually have an ex-spouse on there because they've forgotten to change beneficiaries. It's very important to double check your beneficiaries, maybe on an annual basis, to make sure there aren't any changes that you need. Because if something happens to you and you've got an ex-spouse on a beneficiary form, it's going to them whether you like it or not. So that's the thing. I mean, if something happens to you, whatever's on the beneficiary is going to trump anything else you have. Will, trust, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, Wes, I think Trey said that the other day. There are times when your will does not matter. What is he referring to there?
Well, we're not estate planning attorneys, but we can certainly review trust, will documents, help people understand what happens at their death. You could have the fanciest trust drawn up in the world, spend all kinds of legal fees and, get it dotted, every I dotted, every T crossed. But if most of your money is in retirement accounts or designated beneficiary accounts, those beneficiary designations will trump the will and will trump the trust that you formed. So that's very important to just review the beneficiary designations on those accounts in addition to your normal estate planning like wills and trusts.
I know sometimes, Trey, people want us to talk to their attorneys. We're happy to do that. I mean, I've been doing this 41 years, used to do a lot of estate planning and all that kind of thing. But what we always try to provide the attorney, I think, rather than trying to give them advice on the legal advice side, is make sure the attorney fully understands how these assets are held. And I've seen some of these attorneys very appreciative of these game plans because a lot of times they're not sure. They're just trying to draft the trusts and all that. But to Wes's point, I mean, if somebody has, let's say, all of their assets are in an IRA, and maybe they've got a home over here, maybe they don't need as fancy a trust as they thought they did.
Yeah, we had a client recently. We delivered that final binder, went over all the contracts, all the Schwab accounts, confirmed how the accounts were invested, confirmed beneficiaries on every account. I think there were 6 different accounts. They went and shared that with their attorney, who they had already done some trust work on, and the attorney even told them, oh, wow, this is pretty impressive stuff. And what was so nice about it is the way that they had everything drawn up, nothing had to really go through probate. They had the trust that maybe took care of their home and the bank accounts, and all that was all set aside. The attorney agreed none of the assets with us had to be put in the trust. So everything was very clean, everything was confirmed and organized, and both of them felt really good about it.
Heather, any thoughts?
No, I mean, Trey's right. It's, just to be on top of your beneficiaries and for us to be able to coordinate and work with your attorney that is handling your estate documents, that's the best of both worlds.
And Heather, you're in that Bowling Green office. Of course, our service department originates and handles all the death claims, but speak to what Mandy Houchins and the group there are doing and how much work we put in after someone passes away. I had to meet with a young lady who lost her spouse recently, and just updating all the beneficiaries and things that people don't think about that we handle in our office, as opposed, we ran into somebody the other day somebody that sells a lot of annuities. They don't even handle this stuff. They went to them over service issues, and the person said, we don't do any of that stuff. You're going to have to call the company for that. So speak to the amount of work we do from a service standpoint.
Yeah, that's a frustrating thing because we take so much pride in our service. As you mentioned, Mandy Houchins handles all the death claims. She coordinates with the companies and the beneficiaries on the forms that are needed, get those filled out properly, getting them submitted to the company. If they're keeping funds with us, she'll coordinate with me on how to set up new accounts for those clients. But we pride ourselves on the customer service that we do on all aspects of our accounts and our clients. But a lot of people are just kind of left in the dark. They don't even know where their deceased loved ones' assets are. So we've provided tools for that. A lot of times we'll tell clients, tell the kids or whoever, if something happens to you, to look for the binder and call us because we will handle everything after that fact.
Yeah, Wes, I was on a call the other day. Again, one of the spouses had lost her spouse. He had had an illness for a long time. And we went over the game plan with her, and she wasn't sure about it. She said, I'd like for you to talk to my son. I don't know if I told you about this. Really interesting. The son had a lot of reservations about what we were recommending. I'd never even met the adult son. He lived way out west. So I got on a Zoom call with her and the son, And once he saw the game plan and we talked through it, he was like, this sounds great. But I think it was the game plan and his understanding of what we were trying to do now for his mom, who's all alone, just from a communication standpoint, made it so easy.
Yeah, if you're an adult child looking at your parents' finances and they've employed a financial advisor, you don't know them from Adam. They could be any sort of person off the street trying to take advantage of your parents. So to be able to look to the person, to know that they're a fiduciary, to have a game plan backing what they say they're going to do, and to be carrying out all these processes for when the surviving spouse is now left alone with this money, it can be pretty comforting to that person, knowing they're in good hands.
Yeah, in the very last page of that delivery binder, I keep going back to it, but it is that final culmination of all the accounts being established. We do have a conversation starter. It's not a fun conversation to have, but who are you going to have that conversation with that needs to know who the heck we are should both of these clients pass away and these beneficiaries have to come to us to claim this money? And Mandy does such a great job of that, but if our clients don't know to keep addresses updated, beneficiaries updated, those claim documents would never reach those beneficiaries if they were with some advisor out there who just had these accounts out there strewn everywhere. So when you really have a game plan and you pull everything under one roof, these beneficiary issues just don't exist.
There's a good section there in the last day planner too. Do you have any gold buried in the walls? A lot of these older people, you never know. Look through their houses.
Well, speaking of gold buried in the walls, we're about out of time here, but I would like to say, because people ask this of me, Tony, what happens to this place if you get run over out there on I-65 running back and forth to Bowling Green? So thankfully, I've got you all in the wings. And folks, that's a huge issue. So maybe that's you right now. You're working with an advisory firm and you don't know who's going to take over if something happens to them. Why don't you consider talking to us for a second opinion? Just log on right now to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. Take advantage of something we call the free 10-minute fiduciary phone call. We'll be happy to meet with you and discuss your situation. If it warrants, we'll provide one of these free retirement game plans. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Have yourself a merry little Christmas.
Worry-Free Music presents the greatest collection of Christmas covers ever assembled.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Hey!
Tony Walker's A Humdinger Christmas. 486 timeless classics across 6 digitally remastered 8-track tapes.
Happy holidays!
Every song fills your home with holiday magic.
Sing ding-a-ding, ring ding-a-ding, ding ding-a-ding, dong ding-a-ding, ring ding-a-ding, ding ding-a-ding, ring ding-a-ding, ring ding-a-ding.
Don't miss this opportunity to receive Tony Walker's A Humdinger Christmas, the perfect way to celebrate the joy of this holiday season.
Dashing through the snow, hey, and one horse open sleigh, yeah.
Only $685 plus $3 shipping and handling. Order yours today.
8-track tape player not included. Offer void where prohibited.
And from all of us at Tony Walker Financial, have a Merry Christmas.
Want to know what most advisors hate talking about? The fees they're going to charge you to manage your money. Not so with Tony Walker Financial. In fact, we are so confident in our services that we now have a posted video on our website called How We Get Paid. So before blindly handing over your money to just any advisor who won't tell you how they get paid, check out our video at TonyWalkerFinancial.com or give us a call anytime at 877-499-9255.
This Tony Walker Financial 5-star review comes to us from Ann Smithson. We came to Tony because our bad experience with a former fiduciary. Tony is so wonderful to talk to, and he takes the time to ensure we are comfortable with the action plan we developed. They have impressed us with their quick response. Trey and the whole team has been great to work with. They take the time to answer our questions and to ensure we understand everything. If you'd like to read more of our 5-star reviews, simply log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
Welcome back to the Worry-Free Retirement. We're continuing down this trek of decision fatigue, and in case you're just now joining us, we're tagging each of these shows with more of a spiritual perspective from none other than Mr. Bob Russell. Bob, thank you for continuing this journey with us. I am really enjoying this and appreciate your insights so much to these difficult decisions.
Well, thank you, Tony. I wish you'd ask easier questions. do the best I can.
We touched on this very briefly. Let's kind of set the stage, Bob. Maybe a spouse is deteriorating health. It could be Alzheimer's, just cancer, whatever is wearing on that other spouse trying to be the caregiver. What encouragement, maybe to both spouses, you could give, but I'm sure you've seen this play out. And even sometimes the guilt associated when you have to make that tough decision of possibly placing them in a nursing home. Could you address that, please?
So many thoughts go through my mind. Well, the Bible says we're to honor our mother and father, and sometimes we have to care for them. The Bible commands us in Ephesians 5:33, husbands, love your wives. And there's no qualifier there. There's nothing to say, hey, until she gets to be 65 and she can't walk as fast as she used to, or she doesn't think as well as she used to. We're to love people. Now, again, times have changed. It used to be if you loved somebody, that meant you kept them yourself in your home and you provided for them. And I see examples of that all the time, of people doing amazing things with their spouse. I think of a guy in our church, many people in Louisville would know him, Jim Katina, who is an educator here in town. And he was retired from the Board of Education, and his wife, Vicki, got Alzheimer's at age 59. And within a year, she didn't know who he was. But for 13 years, he cared for her. I mean, he would help her dress. He would read scripture to her in the morning. They'd go to the zoo 3 times a week because she loved animals and she needed to walk. 13 years, when she couldn't function. His own kids said, boy, our dad's a saint. And he had the resources and he had the time, and he loved her to demonstrate that. And I admire that. But not everybody can do that. Here's a wife whose husband becomes mentally incapacitated or physically, and she can't lift him. She can't provide for the needs that he has every day. And maybe the most loving thing for her to do is to put him in some kind of extended care facility nearby where he can get better care. She can go visit him every day. She can still express love. And she is freed up to be the person, the best caregiver she can be in that setting. So I don't know that there's a blanket principle that applies to every situation. Sometimes people feel guilty if they would decide to put a loved one in a good care facility. But if you pray and you ask God's guidance, that may be the best care that they can give. It may be the best for your own emotional health. I wish every situation were like my father-in-law. My father-in-law was one of those guys that the older he got, the more gracious he became. My wife and I said, you know what? Virgil's living by himself up there in Rushville, Indiana, 2.5 hours away. He needs to get out of the house. So we started looking at some of the facilities here in town. And he came to us and said, you know, I think it's time for me to move out of my house. And we said, well, we got some places. Well, we'll visit. I think I'm going to stay at the lodge here in Rushville. And he went into the lodge. And you know what? His friends were quicker to come visit him at the lodge than they would be at his house. And he maintained his relationships in the church. Then we said, he needs to quit driving. And just about the time I did take the keys away from me, I think I better sell my car.
So he was making it easy on everybody.
He was ahead of everybody.
Yeah.
But that's rare.
Yeah.
That's rare. And it's really tough to care for people because we always think we can function better than we really can.
Yeah.
And we want to drive. We want to be on our own. And to forcibly take care of our loved ones is not an easy task, and you really need the strength of the Lord to make those decisions.
I would say amen to that. Well, Bob, really good stuff. Again, we've got more bullet points to cover, folks. We're out of time. We're going to be back next week with Mr. Russell, and also more on just decision fatigue with your retirement. In the meantime, this is the Worry-Free Retirement. I'm Tony Walker. Until next week, we'll see you then.